Hey everybody, today we are sketching creature hands and feet. This is a very important aspect of creature design because oftentimes we do not think about the environments in which our creatures actually live in. We just want to draw something cool and hope it ends up great. And in order to truly make it believable, one of the greatest things that you could do is have convincing fingers and claws and feet for your creature. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm just going to start things off by doing a creature hand with just a couple claws. And then I'm going to show you how you can make these things look as realistic as possible. So first things first, in order to take the stiffness away from how your hands and feet look when you draw them, think about all of the different tendons and skin layers and the fat folds and wrinkles and age and scales, all of that bends. Think about how they bend, how they move. Look at your own hand, look at your own fingers for a minute and start moving them around and think about it. Like all the tendons in your fingers, like your thumbs, your wrist. What would it look like if you were to draw a beast that had those types of effects? And the toes also. All right, so one of the first mistakes I see with beginner artists when they do claws is that when the claw comes out of the finger, they start when they want to draw the skin on it, they start at the top of the nail and they just move back, assuming that that's where the finger should be. Can that exist? Yeah, of course. You're making something up that doesn't exist, so who am I to say that it's not correct? But if you want to make things truly believable and relatable, then you need to start thinking about how our animals on Earth and how we as humans are built. Okay, so first things first, the nail coming out of the actual hand, you're going to want to have skin and a layer of fat and blood and tendons and muscles surrounding that nail so that it can grow out. All right, so we're going to put that on there. So right off the bat, a really good example is to look at bird feet, especially the larger birds like eagles, condors, vultures, emu, cassowaries, those types of birds where they have very pronounced feet and huge talons and whatever other type of claws are coming out of their foot. So when you do that, think about, okay, the underlying structure is starting to exist here. I have the claw coming out of the finger, and then I have the skin and muscles built up around the back of it so it looks like it's growing out of the bone. And then, of course, you have your finger shaft. And then the other thing that is mostly forgotten is that very next knuckle. All right, so that's the other thing. How many knuckles are in joints, for that matter? How many are going to exist on your creature? Now, is it going to have 20 or 30, or is it going to have 2? You want it to seem like it could bend normally so that it can grip its prey, and maybe even if it's webbed, kind of like, duck feet, maybe it swims. And I'll get into feet in a second because there's a lot of different possibilities. I'm just doing a clawed version just because it's easily recognizable. It's a lot of fun to draw creatures that have very deadly looking claws. And to make these look believable, you have to make it look like there's an underlying structure within that finger. So this is typically what I like doing. All right, and I also leave open some areas, especially on the bigger knuckles or the bigger knuckled area where scales can exist. So for example, up here, we're going straight dinosaur, old school large bird designs like this. Okay, and then on top of this finger, down here, that second shaft. So what that does is it gives an illusion that it's not only protected, but when it gets wider in this joint, we know that there's a bone and tendons going to that joint so that this whole bottom half can move. And then it stops. This is where all of or most of the mechanical movement and joints happen, right here in that first thick part. Okay, think about your own finger. Okay, think about the very end of it, and then you think about that first joint, the first knuckle, and then the second knuckle, and of course you have the big one at the end. Now, does your creature have to have all three? No. But if you want to make it as believable as possible and it can articulate that way, it's probably a good idea to draw that. All right, so then what you want to do is you want to indicate that there's some separation here, maybe from some fat and some skin that hangs on the bottom part of the finger, and then shade just a little bit on the bottom of the finger. And I'm not doing anything fancy here, folks. It's literally just making sure that the structure exists after I draw the nail. Okay, I want to pay close attention to make sure that there's thickness around that nail so it looks like the nail is growing out of an area versus being placed on an area. And another version of this would be if you were to see a creature claw from the side, maybe here's the side view, okay, and then you have the thickness of the claw underneath it. Kind of like a human finger, but if it had sharp claws, like a vampire or whatever. Okay, and then it grows out. So now, as you move down that nail, you know that underneath that skin, it is growing out of something. Okay, of course, I know it sounds gross, but you can actually take your nail off and it will regrow. A nail is just dead cells. That's all it is. And of course, there are other things in the nail, but that's the majority of it. Okay, and then right here, when you want to put some points on it, just make the ends of it darker. Okay, and if you're wondering what pencil I'm using, it is a 4B Faber-Castell, and then I'm just sketching on a smaller Moleskine sketch pad. That's all I'm using. You could do this on printer paper, and you can use a number 2 pencil, you can use a mechanical pencil, charcoal, doesn't matter. Now you can start to see the realism coming in where there's separation. Okay, the bone definitely comes on the top. You can see this little divot right here, similar to our fingers. Okay, so if you move your middle finger up, you can see the separation between the muscles underneath the main bones. Okay, it's the same thing. You want to draw some skin folding, so that's like a sharp version of it. And then let's say that your creature has something really crazy going on with it. Okay, what if you have a huge claw and then you have tiny little ones coming out, and we're just totally making stuff up at this point. Okay, I just totally made up that joint. That is a crazy looking hand. How would we make that look realistic without just second guessing ourselves? Well, we got to think about, what is this gigantic raptor-like claw? How is it going to attach to a larger hand or a larger appendage? Okay, so think about the skin that surrounds that claw. So maybe we have to draw the skin down here, okay, and then wrap it around, make it a little thicker. So now we know that the claw comes out of that area. And then we want to fatten up that hand right there, because guess what? If that claw is big enough to attach to the bone within that hand, then the bone itself is going to have to be larger. It's kind of like having a large jaw, so that if you do something like a saber-toothed tiger, the Smilodon, the tooth root will grow into the skull that's bigger than the actual tooth. Okay, so think about these smaller little claws here. All right, so think about these knuckles that we drew for this hand. What are we going to do with these? Well, we got to draw the thickness first surrounding the nail. That's the first thing to make it believable. The second thing, how are they going to move? They can't just stick out like that. To me, and that your opinions might vary, whoever's watching this, to me it looks like they need an extra knuckle so that they can retract and move freely. What if they do have to grip? All right, so we have that. And then the second part goes up to a larger knuckle at the top. So now it looks more believable. You have this gigantic claw here, which probably needs a giant knuckle. So maybe that can retract. And then you have the palm of the quote-unquote hand right underneath these nails, and the nails themselves are going to darken. So I'm just going to leave the tone of the paper in the middle of the nail so that it looks like some light is reflecting off of it. And then once we have that, it will be different enough from the tone of the actual hand. So if we wanted to put some shading on there, it's going to shade across that hand like this. And any skill level can definitely do this. You don't even need to shade. You could just do the outline of all the joints. You don't need to do anything special. Just think about line work. Think about your design coming across clearly versus all the technical aspects of your sketching. Okay, that's the other thing about being a concept artist is it's more important to have the concept come through. The technical part of drawing comes later. That just comes with repetition. But being able to critically think, that is not teachable. You have to do it. And you have to do it and do it and do it until you learn how to research and show your ideas. That's the thing. Because being a concept artist, you're an idea factory. So you want all your ideas to show clearly. One of the best lessons that I was ever taught in school was that you know you're successfully showing your idea if you can mount your entire presentation on a board or a wall, step back and have a group of people understand everything about your presentation without you speaking. If you did that, then your idea comes across without question. So that's how you know you're successful. Now let's say you want to do a creature hand that is not as deadly, but it's a little bit more human-like. So in that case, you want to think about what it needs to grip, how it eats, and what's the overall function of each of the parts of the hand. So for example, if you wanted to do something more human-like, let's do something light. Okay, and maybe you have a joint for the thumb, some knuckles. Okay, there's like a thumb part. See how light and loose this is? It doesn't have to be special. And now this is a creature, so it's not going to be human. Okay, you have the first knuckle, and then maybe comes down, and then there's the tip. Okay, so we got finger number 1. You got the skin stretching across, and then all of a sudden, your creature hand, maybe it has another type of finger in the back. Okay, there's 3 parts to it. So there's the second knuckle, and then maybe it has a tiny pinky, like this, how it stretches out. And then that's it. Very alien looking. All right, so think about the atmosphere, or not the atmosphere, but the environment that it lives in. What kind of nails does it need? What kind of tendons, stretched skin? Does it need scales? What are you trying to convey about this? So let's say it's really smooth. In that case, we want to make sure that each new directional transition is going to be smooth without many wrinkles to it. So it's very smooth like this. Maybe the knuckle isn't as big on that thumb or appendage, whatever you want to call it. But the nail isn't sharp. Maybe it's just elongated like that. Well, guess what? I want to make sure that that nail grows out of a finger that is fat enough directly around that nail so it looks like the nail is growing out of it instead of being placed on it or having a seamless transition to the point where it doesn't look like there's any skin to there. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you think about some of the creatures out there that we see in games and movies where the bone of the finger just flows directly into the claw. And like, yeah, that looks deadly, it looks demonic, nightmarish, but we don't always have to draw nightmarish and demonic things. I can't believe I'm saying that because I love doing that. Those of you that know my work. But you don't always have to draw things like that. Sometimes it's cute, sometimes it's fuzzy. Okay, well how do those, like how do hamsters and how do guinea pigs and even cute little kittens, like how do their feet look? All right, so here's another example of how this non-sharp and non-deadly nail would grow out of this finger. See how small it is? Okay, but we still need to do each part for the finger. Okay, now the other thing is when we look at this creature hand, we got the palm right here. We have what appears to be its thumb, and we have a fatter part here. Okay, this whole ridge right there is where the main fingers grow out of the palm of the hand. Okay, so we have these two, and then we have that third little pinky one. All right, so we got to do the nail for the pinky. And then we got that fatty tissue directly under the nail, so it looks like it's part of a overall structure. And then, of course, can't forget this one up here. Oh, if you guys are wondering, this was done during a live stream. This was the very creepy, hairy, alien, deadly, demonic worm that I drew. So check out my live stream that I just posted last Friday if you want to watch me draw that and talk about art. Okay, so this part, to have it be believable, you got to think about the muscles. You got to think about what skin is going to bend. And I don't necessarily want scales to exist on this hand. I think if it's smooth and it just stays that way, it's kind of cool. So see how loose I'm keeping everything? I'm drawing all these spheres, and I have bigger ovals, and then more spheres up here for the knuckles. And of course you can have some cylindrical shapes. You know, for example, if you got a really long finger, then you could do something like this, where you have an ellipse, and you have the shaft for the cylinder, and then at the end of the cylinder shape, if you want a joint there, just do a sphere and then do the other cylinder that attaches to it. Maybe have it taper to a slightly sharper corner, and then of course you can have your sharp claw on the end of there. But remember, not everything has to be sharp. And we're just doing hands right now, and then I'll show you how to do feet. This is more for like bipedal creatures or three-legged, something that doesn't require it to run on all fours, because this is definitely not a runnable hand, if that's a word. You probably need something like hooves or bigger bird-like feet in general. And I'm just kind of playing with the shape here, just seeing what could be done with the silhouette. Big knuckles, maybe it's a very, very strong and dexterous hand. It can grip things powerfully. Notice how I'm just indicating where some shadows could be versus spending way too much time making sure the veins look good and everything's shaded. I don't need to do that. There are thousands and thousands and millions of different combos you can do for the creatures, because if you're drawing along with me, each creature that you're drawing is different than the other person doing it. That's the beauty of creature design in general. All right, so let's move this down a little bit so I can draw up here. Okay, and another example of maybe a pretty unique and crazy looking hand. We think of the human hand as 5. Okay, who knows what's out there? What if there is just one giant finger like this, and then small little bumps where the fingers could be? Maybe that is its hand, but all of a sudden you see the tendons inside that big rounded clover area. Looks like a plant. Speaking of plants, if you want some good inspiration about creature design, just look at plants, especially exotic ones. The shapes in there are very, very cool. So here's another one. It's more webbed, maybe it's like a fin. But again, if you're going to do a fin, you don't have your traditional human or lizard-like or ape-like fingers that we're used to seeing, because we stare at our own hands every day. You know, we look at dogs, we look at cats, we look at non-hoofed animals. We're thinking, okay, how is this going to be a hand? Well, guess what? If you do the indication of some tendons and maybe some small spheres for knuckles, and then continue that all the way up to the carpal region up here where the wrist is, you're going to have a believable hand, even though there's very few frames of reference that we can get this from, except if it's like a manatee or a turtle or even a platypus, you know, like even the beak. There's a lot of different things that we can look at. And I'm just going to darken these nails. So that could be a hand, and maybe it kind of dips in like this. I'm just making this up as I go because it's a lot of fun. I'm just dipping in every other one. And that's like a hand. So there's so many fun possibilities we can do, but even if I'm making something up so crazy, I have to think about the structure from which it exists and the environment that it comes from. If it has a hand like this, it probably lives in an aquatic region / tropical, where it can swim and crawl on land. Maybe there's like a hole in there. It looks like a sand dollar. It's a lot of really cool things that you can do. And of course, if you wanted to make it look like there's holes in there, I have to shade around it, and then not shade in the middle of that. Okay, so there's a different type of hand right there. So you can see each one of these is believable in its own right. Now, how do we do feet? Okay, so if you're thinking about a quadrupedal animal, or three-legged even if it's alien, doesn't matter, or maybe it just walks on tentacles. But if we're doing a jointed foot with tendons, ligaments, muscles, think about what type of land and environment that it lives in. Okay, so one thing that I like to do if I'm figuring out a very unique foot is I draw the ground plane first, especially if I'm doing something very complicated. I don't think I have anything. This is more of a newer sketchbook here. I got that serpent. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I got some cool ones here. This is a really crazy one. Okay, but you can see down here, this foot is only three-toed, and then it looks like the major part of its body is sitting on a tail that's shaped like a plant being flattened out. This is like a slug / crab. Let's see. Oh yeah, so here's another one. Okay, we have these crazy looking feet. It almost is like a mutated bat. Okay, but what happens is, similar to a gorilla, how they roll up their wrists and they just walk on the top of their hand or their knuckles. This creature's similar to that. And it's two-clawed at the end. Alright. What else do I got in here? Just working on scales. Yeah, here's a standard one. So this is more of like a gremlin. I don't know if you can see that very well, but look at the feet down here. Two-toed feet. It's kind of like an ostrich / wild boar with bigger claws. Okay, ostrich actually they have awesome feet. This is more just straight up mutated zombie whatever this thing is. It was just for fun to show some pen and ink drawing. Pen and ink. Pen is ink. I don't need to say pen and ink. I only need to couple those together. This is just blue ballpoint. This is a Bic Ultra Round. What else do I got in here? Oh yeah, typical bird. Scary, scary, scary bird. But more like a stork. Like that. Okay, so let's go back to our feet here. So if you have the flat ground here, think about how the foot will need to rest on the actual ground. And think about the environment that it lives in. If it's dry, if it's desert-like, probably it will need some form of claws so that it can dig through the dirt for food or to take off running from predators. And then the second thing is if it's hooved, it will prevent its skin from burning because of how hot the sand and the ground is, etc. So let's say that there are actual toes. So you want to make these as believable as possible. So think about the knuckles. I always say knuckles of the foot, the joints. We're going to do something very simple, and then the nail coming out. Very, very typical. The only thing about this foot is you need to think about the different types of joints that it has. Okay, so if the ankle is right here, I'm just going to indicate that with a sphere. Very typical dinosaur-like toe with the middle nail showing right here, and then the side toe right there. And then maybe there are some others on the other side. All right, so I'm going to do these little humps to show the different joints of the toe. All right, and then of course the tops of the toes going all the way to the end by the toenails. Those are the tendons. Okay, every time that you lift your toe up, you can see the tendons in your foot move, and the tendons all attach here at the ankle and the top of the foot. Okay, and each foot's different. This is your ignore this part. Actually, you know what? What if that was attached to it? That was like a happy accident on my page. But let's say you're doing something hooved. Okay, so let's look at it from top-down view. Think about the structure. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention, when you draw a foot and it is pressed down onto the ground in your drawing, you need to make sure that the skin, the fat layer, the scales or whatever are being pushed out because of the weight distribution. Okay, when you take your hand or your foot and you push down on the table, you can see your skin move outwards, and the muscles and everything about your hand, the blood, the veins, everything moves outwards. The same thing is going to happen with the foot, which is why a lot of the creature designs and portfolios just simply don't look right. For example, if you see, let's give your typical dinosaur foot, okay? 3 toes. All right, so you got your joints, okay? Very bird-like. Got your ankle. Maybe it's not even a velociraptor, I don't know. Just typical 3-toed for a meat eater. Okay, so it's starting to come out like this, and then what do people do? They do claws that go straight at us. That's not how claws look when they step towards us if they're on a larger bird. Just think about emu, cassowary, ostrich, pretty much any bird with large feet like that. Instead, you'll notice that there's slight bending and a slight angular change. Okay, so you could see how the flattened part of the skin is happening directly under the claw. That's how you're going to draw and design believable feet. But what happens over here on these toes? Think about when you stand up barefoot. Most people on this planet, our pinky toenail does not point directly ahead of us. Okay, it's because that toe grows on the side of our foot, the far edge of our foot. So what happens is the pinky sometimes gets bent sideways. It's just the way human bodies work. And then the toe right next to it is more straightened until you get to the big toe. Big toe is usually separated just a little bit based on anatomy. But think about how the claws will work with something like this. Okay, so we think that the toe is just going to, for this creature, just going to grow out this way. You know, it's just going to grow out this way because it's easy. But let's say that the creature is slightly turning a corner. Well, the toe is actually going to get bent a little bit. Okay, so what this does, these different directional changes, it's going to look like there's actual real weight distribution with the fingers. So now we can, or I'm sorry, the toes. So now it's more believable, like, oh, if we keep going up this leg, we're going to see a leg that's bent. We're going to see muscles that are activated. And this creature is actually on the move. That is the type of realism that you want to get. Now notice down here, I'm flattening out right underneath the toe part because I want to give the illusion that the tissue, like the skin, the fat tissue underneath it, is being pushed away because the creature is stepping down onto the ground. Okay, now if you're going to do something hooved, it's not going to look like that per se. Let's change this. All right, instead, you're going to have something like this. So if it's in side view, there's the ground, and it's hoofed. Okay, you're going to have a strong looking hoof, but let's say your creature has, you know, some claws coming out here. Maybe it's equivalent to a dew claw. However, you're going to want to show some skin separation. Okay, so from the actual hoof, which is, I mean, toenail material. Same thing was like from the horns on a rhino. So we have that. And then guess what? That skin that's growing right next to the hoof, you can kind of see it bend underneath that nail. And the nail or the hoof itself is going to be curved slightly. And let's say there's 2 parts to the hoof. Okay, and then there's more skin in the back. Now this part, you're going to want to show some of the tendons coming up, and then it bends into the ankle instead of going straight down, and then it'll look way too stiff, which is why a lot of creatures and portfolios, they look placed on the paper versus living on the paper. And you want to make sure that your creature looks living. You want to make it look like a field agent or a land surveyor or somebody from National Geographic or some kind of exploratory team. They're going into nature and taking pictures of these things living and breathing in their own environments versus just forcing them on a page and having them be believable. This is why cast shadows are important. This is why weight distribution is something I preach constantly about creature design. See these wrinkles that I'm putting in here? Now the foot looks even more believable because it's being pinched right there. We know that this is the ankle, okay, and then the major bones are here, and then the flat part where the hoof is there. All right. Another type of foot that you can do is something totally off the wall. So let's say that you want to design some, like something 3-toed, something we haven't seen before. All right. How are the actual toes going to bend? Maybe there are 2 in the back like this, and then there's one major one up here in the front. Now, if you're completely making up a foot, you can still look at reference on feet that actually do exist. Okay, let's think about the lizards. Let's think about even a human foot. Let's think about birds, crocodiles, whatever type of animal you want to use as a reference. Think about the joints. Okay, so you want to put those spheres in. You always put the spheres in the bigger areas and then connect the tendons to those spheres. And this is very beginner level, so we're not going into each of these joints and, oh, this is where the carpal bones and the tendons and the ligaments are going to, you know, coexist, and there's some skin wrinkles here and some hair coming out. Like, no, we're not doing that. We're getting the major shapes in first. Okay, there we go. So notice how these two joints are bending outwards. There's like a nice bend here, almost as if it's a slide in some kind of park. Okay, and then it comes down. Now, if you have something like this, where you have each of these shafts coming down, they're going to have to come in contact with the ground at some point. What type of nail, what type of toenail does your creature need to have? I didn't realize that was all the way down there. Okay, sorry about that. So if it has that, does it live in a warm climate? Do they have to be sharp? And also, how unique can you really make this? What if there's going to be separation down here at the bottom of each one of these toes with something that splits even farther? What if it's like this? All right, so if you're coming up with a new appendage, there has to be a joint to allow that appendage to move. So more spheres. Okay, and then maybe you have a semi-sharp toe right here, and then the tendons run up that shaft like this. So in reality, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 toes all together. I mean, this thing's crazy, but it's also part of being a creature designer is you want to think about unique ways that your creatures can walk around. I think feet are very neglected, and so are hands. We want the easy way out instead of coming up with something crazy. But you also have to take in consideration making the 3D artist's job a lot easier in sculpting these things. It's kind of like industrial designers being good friends with engineers. They're going to tell you what they want to see in a shape, and then you're going to try to convince them, no, this is how it articulates. Please do this because it's cooler. Okay, and it's like, what kind of a relationship are you going to have with the 3D artist when they have to sculpt this stuff and then rig it and animate it? You don't want them to hate you. Okay, and then of course you have this big sphere up here for the ankle joint, or if it's four-legged, all 4 feet could look like this. And then you have something really unique, and then you can put in the larger scales for the joints, kind of like what you see on a bird. And it just gets really fun after this. I hope you liked today's lesson. It's a slightly shorter lesson, but I think if you take this information and run with it, you can truly have some unique creatures just by cool looking feet and hands. And then I'm going to get into other areas of creature design like more teeth, and I have some videos like that too. So if you enjoyed today's lesson, I encourage you to visit the links in the description below and check out our Creature Design Workshop Discord, where we have monthly challenges, different contests for creature design based on a brief. It's a bustling community. There's a lot of people joining per day, showing their daily sketches, their personal work, and also just helping each other out and becoming better concept artists in general. So while it is focused on creature design, we're learning a lot about animal anatomy, and different people are bringing different aspects of drawing to the table, and I think it's a lot of fun seeing everybody progress in their art. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I now have live sessions every single Friday at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can check the previous 3 out that I have posted. Just go to my live playlist. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and can't wait to get into some more lessons. I have some planned, including how to draw and render drapery and fabric. So definitely stay tuned on that one, because that is a big one. It's probably going to be a more of a longer video than I typically do, but I feel that a ton of people have been asking me how to do that. So like and subscribe if you want to keep track on that. Hit the notification bell. Thanks again. Thanks for all your help. I'll see you guys soon. Later.